Let's start with Tom Yorkie.
Okay.
He is the owner of the Boston Red Sox. I guess you know him. Have you heard of him?
I have, yes, sir.
Okay, and Ted Williams was one of the best baseball players in the world. And he came down here every year with Mr. Yorkie to spend about a month each year, because he loved it down here. It's not crowded like it is in Boston, you know. And I met Ted Williams of South Island Plantation, and Mr. Yorkie owned that. And it's one of the biggest plantations in the Southeast. And I can tell you anything about Mr. Yorkie you want to know, because I was very close to that man, and he was to me. And all these plantations I'm going to talk about, all of them bought cars and pickup trucks and bigger trucks for that plantation from me. I even tell you about his hobby. His wife was dead, and he had a big alligator, 16 feet long, and that alligator was named Ping Pong, and that was his pet. Well, one day he missed Ping Pong and couldn't find him, so he gets in his Jeep and he rides down this dirt lane, you know, around the ponds and stuff. And he found her up on Ping Pong and saw it. Ping Pong was laying across the road, and he was sunning. Alligators left his son. And Mr. Yorkie hollered into him, "Get out the road, get off the road." And he ignored Mr. Yorkie. And Mr. Yorkie took the Jeep and kind of bumped him a little bit, you know, with the tires. Ping Pong slung around, grabbed the left front tire on that Jeep and bit it and snatched it off the rim. And Mr. Yorkie called the shop and said, "Come out here right quick and bring a shotgun with you." Well, one of his mechanics went out there and said, "Bring up something to pull me back in." And he pulled his Jeep back into he had a big garage on that plantation too. A big, beautiful home, and 3 or 4 more homes, small ones that he had of his people to live in that worked for him. And he was a dear, beloved man. And he owned half of Ford Motor Company. And one day he called me and said, "Ralph, can you come over here?" I said, "Yes, sir, I'll be there in 15, 20 minutes. I had to cross the ferry in the waterway on a barge to get over there, you see. And when he built the plantation over there, the state would not let him the state wouldn't put up a barge with a cable on it to pull people across that lived over there, you know. And he said, "Well, don't worry about that." He says, I'll build the damn thing and I'll put it up. And when there is a boat coming through, I'll put a signal down here that it will drop the cables, and they won't even know that the crossing of the ferry is here. He just mash a button and the cables will go down to the bottom of the river. And when they get by, he'll mash the button back. He had a guard there in a little shack that operated it. And then the state said, "Well, that'll be all right, Mr. Yorkie, if you'll do it that way." So he did it. He put up his own ferry, you know. And he was a gentleman. And his wife, she lives over there with him, and they lived together and everything. And of course, he was a little bit wild. He called me one day and wanted me to come over there. I said, "I'm going to bring my son." And Mark wasn't but just a little fellow, you know. And I said, "Put on your baseball cap, you know, for the Boston Red Sox," because he owned the Boston Red Sox. He put it on, and I took him over there, and I said, "This is Mr. Yorkie, son." And Mr. Yorkie hugged him and said, You are my sport." He said, "Ralph, take him all over the plantation and ride him for half a day over there, everywhere." Because it was old Murphy and Cedar Island joined it. and right in the ocean, you know. And boy, Mark saw deers and deers and deers. That place was full of deers. In fact, he built a big ramp, feeding ramp, for them to come up to his yard every so often and eat and go back. He called me one day and said, "Ralph, are you going to be there today?" I said, "Yes, sir." I was the manager in the Ford place, the Laurier Motor Company. And he said, "I want to come out and talk to you." I said, "All right, sir. I'll be here." He said, he came in my office and sit down, and just like you would, you know. He said, "I want me a Galaxy 500 car." That's the sedan, you know. And he said, "I want a Galaxy 500 cigar, and I wanted dark green, the color. And I want automatic with overdrive in it. And I want a 390 engine in it." "Mr. Yorkie, I'm sorry, but they don't put overdrives in an automatic transmission." He said, "The hell do you say, Ralph?" I said, "No, sir, they don't do it." He said, "You get Pete Matheny on the phone to me in Charlotte." He's the distribution agent there, you know, for our cars. I said, "Okay, sir." So I picked up the phone and I called Mr. Pete Matheny. I said, "Mr. Matheny, I got somebody who wants to talk to you. It's your big boss." "Who's that, Ralph?" I said, "Mr. Tom Yorkie." Put him on the phone. He said, "Mr. Yorkie, what trouble you having, Ralph?" He said, "Well, I want me a dark green Galaxy 500 automatic transmission with overdrive." "Mr. Yorkie, they don't make that." "Tell them I said make it, and when you get it made, call Ralph and tell him to come and get it and bring it to me." He said, "Okay, sir." You the boss. And he's called me a lot of times because all these plantations bought cars and trucks from me. And I was one of the biggest salesmen, thank the Lord, in South Carolina. I'd sell 35 or 40 cars a month. Salesmen don't do that. But I was the manager, so I knew what I was doing. Now, that is one of the smartest men I believe that God ever created. One of the smartest men. And he owned Hobcob Plantation. That was, as you go down Highway 17 towards Paulus Island, time to cross the bridge and turn a little small curve on the right, that's Hobcob. That's Mr. Bernard Baruch. And every year, President Roosevelt would come down here on a Pullman train, right in the Pullman car. And now why President Roosevelt didn't fly Air Force One plane is our airport wasn't big enough to land it and take off on it. It was too small. And so he would ride the Pullman train to see Mr. Baruch. And I know why he came. He would tell that Pullman and on that train to stop this Pullman car here right on Highway 521 going to Andrews. Stop it right on that highway because there'll be a car there to pick me up with a driver in it. Because he didn't want to come to town because he'd get lost. And Mr. Bernard Baruch had a man there to pick him up and take him to his plantation. He'd stay a week usually. And now why he came down here and leaving everything else in this country to get something done there for him, which was fine, I'm sure. But Mr. Bernard Baruch played the stock market very, very much, nearly every day. And he knew when to buy and he knew when to sell the stock to make money. And he was a multi-billionaire, billionaire. Mr. Baruch was a brilliant man, and he had one daughter, and her name was Belle Baruch, and she lived with him. His wife was dead. And that place run from Highway 17 all the way to the ocean, down by the end of the waterway too, you see. In other words, he's on 17, in the waterway, in the ocean. And his land was all in between there, which was hundreds of acres of timber. And he wanted to build a laboratory, and he wouldn't tell anybody why until it was built. And he bought a lot of cars and trucks from me. Mr. Bernard Baruch did a lot for this county and state, and he built a laboratory there, way off from his home site. He built this laboratory, and there was a lot of children, students came down from the University of South Carolina to go and train there, you know. And he had two men working there every day, and I knew both of them real well because they're the ones that would call me when Mr. Bernard Baruch wanted something. And I'd go over there and get whatever I was supposed to get from whoever it was. And he finally finished up that laboratory, and those kids came down from 2 or 3 different colleges to learn lab work, I guess. And just before he moved back, passed away, he gave that part of his place to the state of South Carolina for the children to come anytime they wanted to and train over there. And I used to go there at least once or twice a week when they'd call me. And then a little further on down Highway 17 was Arcadia Plantation. And this is another plantation. The people up north that was rich, they would come south, and further south they come, everything was cheaper. And the Vanderbilts built Arcadia Plantation on both sides of the highway to the river. This is 17th north. Arcadia was on this side, and it went to the river, to the highway, and from highway to the ocean. And all that was his property. And there was creeks and roads too, all through there, which he had to maintain this himself because he wanted those roads open, and he would put backhoes out there to build the roads, you know, and trucks and stuff, men. And he built the Arcadia Plantation. And Mr. Vanderbilt was a very rich man, so was Mr. Baruch. But Mr. Baruch had more up here than any man I've ever known in my entire life. He was a smart man. He knew when to buy stock. He knew when to sell the stock. When it got down to low, he'd buy all he could buy because he knew it was going back up, you see, making more money. And so Wallace Pate and I was very good friends, and Wallace married one of the Vanderbilt girls, Lulu. And they stayed married and enjoyed life over there and for several years. And then Wallace opened up a marine place and wanted me. He called me one day and said, "Ral, come over here, I want to talk to you." I said, "Okay, what's going on, Wallace?" He said, "I got this marina here, and I got a big dock right here on the river, right behind it. And it's right on Front Street. Well, Front Street is on the river, you know that." And he said, "I'm just tired of this thing, but I love it, but I'm tired of it. I want you to come here and take over the marina and the building and all the contents in it. I'm gonna give it to you. I want you to have it." I said, "Wallace, I'm not an indoor man. I'm an outdoor. I just don't want it. Ralph, I'm giving it to you. No, I don't want it, Wallace. And we were very close friends, good buddies. And so Wallace got sick, and he had brain damage. And he kept on running the place, and finally Wallace passed away, and that like to kill me. And upstate South Carolina, his daddy was rich. And but Wallace was a close friend of mine. And that's the way that I got to know a lot of people, by talking and doing with those people that was rich. And me, a little poor fellow, you know, I was poor as water. And then the next one was Walker P. Inman. He lives right across there. We got a little creek right here, and right beyond that creek is marshland, and then the river, and then his house. And God, I don't know how much land he owns over there. That's Walker P. Inman. And his wife died way back yonder, and he got a nurse to come in and take care of him and do his bookwork and stuff. And finally his wife died, and she was gone for quite a while, and then I guess he finally fell in love with his nurse. And he married her, and he had one child named Chipper. And that was a mistake. That boy was something. And I talked to him several times. I'd go in to see him, and I don't know, he was just wild. Now, Walker P. Inman, you might know this lady here, I don't know, named Doris Duke. You ever heard of her? Okay, Doris Duke is a very rich lady. And she's on Duke's Pickles, Duke's Mayonnaise. She owns Duke Manufacturing Company. She owns Duke Power Company, which that's a big power company in this world. Dr. Carmichael was our family doctor, and we were like brothers. And my wife had a stroke. That was 22 years ago. And he called me one day, and she was in this hospital here. And she said, Ralph, you get your wife out of that hospital now, and you be ready to ride tomorrow morning at 4 o'clock. Doc, what are you talking about? I've already called there and made plans for her to go there in Duke Medical University, which is one of the best hospitals in the country. And Doris Duke owns that, and the big college there for the children. And she owns all of that, warehouses and everything, tobacco warehouses, Duke Power Cup, Duke Mayonnaise, Duke Pickle. Very rich woman, very rich. And that was Walker P. Inman's sister. They took her in that hospital, and I then met people there from all over the world. And I said, well, why did you come to this hospital? Said, well, we heard so much about it, and it was bragged on so much from people, and how good you're treated here, and they got well. That's the reason we brought our family here. I said, well, you brought them to the right hospital. And they operated on my wife up there, and I never seen such hospitality in my life as I saw while I was there. I stayed at the Cricket Motel across the street, wasn't a half a block, for quite a while away from my job. And I called the owner of the dealership and told him my situation, because I was a manager of it. I said, I can't leave my wife now. He said, Ralph, you go ahead and stay with your wife. And so I did until they called this place in Florence and told me to take her there in this nursing home, which was for the sick. And I took her there. And, but believe me, if I ever get sick, I want to go to Duke Medical University, because that is a fine place. And the doctor treats you like a brother up there. They found a tumor in her heart as big as a golf ball, and it was pressing up against the artery of the heart. And this doctor, she was like a nurse or something, but she was a smart woman. She spent the night studying my wife's background and everything else, and who operated on everything. And that morning, my phone rang in the room at the motel, and Mr. Pender, are you dressed? I said, well, almost. Well, get over here right quick as soon as you can. Is my wife all right? Yep, she's fine. I went over there, and he told me what room to come to, and he said, this lady right here studied all night long on your wife's background to find out what was wrong with her. And that's what she found with that tumor. It was pressing against the artery, cutting the blood circulation off to the brain. And so I said, well, are they going to proceed on that right soon? Oh, yeah. 2 doctors called me in the office and told me how long it would take and how it was, you know. So I listened good, because I was very interested in my wife, because she was a beautiful woman, and I married her forever. She sit in that chair many a day right there, and I don't want nobody sitting in that chair. And sure enough, Dr. Peter Van Trott, Dr. Laura Armstrong was the one that worked on her. And when they finished that day, 8-hour operation, they took me in the room and talked with me and said, your wife will be all right now. Well, she got a lot better, but she didn't get completely right. Because I built 2 ramps out there on that patio for her to walk back and forth on, you know, and a deacon bench at one end with a cushion in it for her to sit on after she got tired. And I built her one just before she died, and I built her a second one because I tore the other one down because I thought maybe she'd be walking by herself. She never did walk for 21 years after she had a stroke. That almost broke me, but I didn't care. Every dime I spent on her, I was glad to spend it. And my son's the same way, which was Mark. And I adopted him, and he was 2 months and 3 days old. And me and Mother went to Columbia to get him and brought him home and raised him. I couldn't have found a better one, because I love that boy to death, and he got his wife, Sheila. I love her, and I love the 2 grandchildren. Caroline, the oldest one, works at the bank. And I traveled quite a bit each year. I would take 10 days of vacation away from my job. And honey, I had some big jobs. And me and my wife would drive down to Miami, and we'd leave there, hit our Interstate 10 and head west. You go to New Orleans, and that's a place too. You ever been there? And we stayed up there a week and saw the World's Fair. That's the worst fair I've ever been to in my life, that fair in New Orleans. And we would just visit, and that 10 days that I had, and I had a company Gulf credit card that I eat on and slept on at night. The owner of the company gave me that, said, yeah, this is your vacation check, the credit card. I guess I spent over $500-600 on that thing, but he didn't care. But I run the Ford store and the Ford and Chrysler Plymouth Dodge dealership too, another one. I run both of them for 48 and a half years, and that's a long time. And when these plantation owners wanted the vehicle, they never asked me the price on any of them. They just said, bring me so-and-so. Bill me for it, and I'll give you a check. Mr. Tom York especially. Mr. Vanderbilt raised turkeys for a hobby because he loved turkeys. And every Thanksgiving, everybody he ever done business with, he'd give them a turkey for Thanksgiving. And he had a whole field of turkeys. I was born and raised at Walpee. And it was a farmhouse because my daddy was a sharecropper. You know what a sharecropper is? That's somebody's farm you work on, but you got to give him half what you make. My daddy was a great farmer. And my mother, she had 11 children, and she adopted one. And while she adopted that one, we was back in the country on a dirt road and a nice home and a big stable for the mules and cows and stuff. And we kept our grain upstairs to feed them. And this young boy came by walking. And Mother had already had me, and I'm the baby of the family. And he walked into the little drive up to the door, and I was there. He said, "Could I speak to your mother?" I said, "Yes, sir." I called Mama. She come out there. She said, "Yes, son. Another fellow wants to talk to you, Mama." He said, "Ma'am, if you got anything in the house I can eat, I'm hungry." She said, "You come on in, son." She took him in and fed him and gave him some tea and stuff. And I'm going to tell you, in our household of Mama and Daddy and 6 girls and 6 boys, there wasn't a dollar in the whole house. We didn't have any money because we had everything in the world that we needed. We had a smokehouse full of meat, and it was being treated the whole time. We had a pantry big as this den, had shelves all the way, and it was slammed full of everything canned. And we had an old wooden ice box that one of the boys made that we kept ice in, that would last for 7 days. The wall in it was that thick so it wouldn't melt. And the ice wagon come by once a week. And the ice wagon ice that we got was about 50 cents for a piece of ice to put in there to keep our stuff that was perishable. Anyway, there wasn't a dollar ever in our whole house. There wasn't no money. And everything that we wanted was coffee, sugar, and rice. Daddy would put me on the old Jack, the mule. We had a mule named Jack, wasn't many. And son, go to town and get me a couple pounds of coffee. It wasn't ground either. We had to ground it when we get home. And he would charge that until he sold his tobacco, and then he would pay his fee for whatever he owed the old store. It was called a cash store, and it wasn't no cash, it was always charged. And Dr. Stone and Dr. Bell, they owned it. And you let Mr. Pender have anything he wants, he'll pay you when he gets the tobacco. And I'd jump on Jack with the old sack on his back. I'd jump on Jack and I'd ride to town for 3 miles on his back. I'd tie him up there, go inside to get me coffee, or whatever I was getting, and jump back on him and head back home, get stuff. There wasn't any cars then. That was way back yonder. That was back in 1927. And that's how we lived. And Mama had, since she had 5 boys and 6 girls, she said, "Well, I'll take another boy." The boy started to leave, and he said, "Ma'am, could I stay with y'all?" She said, "Yes, sir, son. I'll adopt you right now." So she had 6 girls and 6 boys, and I was the youngest of the 12 head. And I caught the devil, my other brothers and sisters. And Deborah and I grew up together. His name was Deborah Granger, the one she adopted. And I went back home after I got to visit some down there, and I stopped at Bellamy's Crossroads. Pat Bellamy, Daddy owned the big store there, and I went to school with him. And I asked Pat if he knew Deborah Granger. He said, "Yeah, Ralph, I know right where you live." I said, "Well, tell me so I can go down there and see him." He was down the road about 3 miles, and on the right-hand side, and I pulled into that house, in the backyard, me and my wife. And I knocked on the back door, and the lady came to the door, and she was an elderly lady. And I said, "Ma'am, does Deborah Granger live here?" "Yes, sir, he does." "Could I speak to him, please?" he came out the back door, and there's another woman in there. He had two old women. He was old too then. And he came to that door, and he was dressed in a Western outfit. And I made fun of him. I said, "Are you Delbert Granger?" He said, "Yeah, who in the hell wants to know?" I said, "Delbert, I'm Ralph Pender." "My God, Ralph." And he hugged me and hugged me. He said, "Sure, I'm glad to see you, son. I haven't seen you since you grew up." And we stayed there in Wonpee until our house burnt one night, and they threw me out the window in the bushes, and everybody was wondering, "Where's Ralph? Where's Ralph?" I threw him in the bushes while I go out there. And then they moved to Little River with a sharecropper there. But Daddy was a wonderful farmer. And Mother, she was a Christian woman. She didn't believe in drinking, cussing, nothing wrong. It was everything had to be good. But Daddy did drink a little bit. She didn't like it, but she told him to. But that's basically my background, but I'm coming to the sad part now. The cash store that we traded at after we moved into town was down the street about a block and a half. And there was a path that far off the highway on the grass before you get to the ditch, and everybody walked in, because back then there wasn't many cars. Everybody walked where they wanted to go. I rode a mule. And I was walking behind Mother about 8 or 10 feet because she wouldn't buy any candy. And she told me why, because she didn't have the money to buy any candy with. And this car came in behind us, and we was almost at the little path to turn off and walk to the house right there. This car came from behind us with 4 black people in it. And one of them said to the highway patrolman, "Let's scare them people." And he jerked the steering wheel and hit Mother and just brushed me and hit her up there and knocked her probably 25 feet into the ditch and killed her. And I went on in the house crying and told Mabel, my sister, "I believe Mother's just got killed, Mabel." "What, son?" And I told her. She said, "Where?" I said, "The car's gone. My mother's out in the ditch." Well, she didn't touch Mother. She went and called the ambulance. And she called Delbert Granger. Called him, and he was the captain of the highway patrol. Back then, they didn't wear used cars. They all rode motorcycles. And he said, Delbert said, "Mother's been killed." "Mabel, what?" "Mother's just been killed, run over by a car." "Well, how'd she get run?" "I'll be there in 10 minutes. He was at Ocean Drive, and that's about 15 miles from our house. He was there less than 10 minutes. And he says, "Mabel," she used to go with him, you know. He said, "I'll have him before the sun rises tomorrow morning." "Well, how are you going to do that?" He said, "I got a way of doing it." He went back to Myrtle Beach and got 10 of his highway patrol and said, "We got to find these fellas before the sun rises tomorrow morning." They found them the next morning. You know where the Pines is at Myrtle Beach? And Deborah said, "Yo, be quiet a minute. I believe I hear something." And he heard like a hammer hitting something. He said, "Let's go through them woods, and each one of you bring your shotgun." He went through the woods, and sure enough, there was the car, and all 4 of them was there beating the car out. He walked up on them and drew the shotgun and said, "The first one moves dies." And he caught them all 4. My next oldest sister moved into our house, and her husband drank pretty good, and I didn't want to live there with him drinking, you know. And so I said, I got Mabel and Eunice, my other 2 sisters, in Georgetown. I said that I got to, it'd be the best thing for me to do is go see them and stay with them. So I got my bag packed. They didn't have many clothes. And said, well, son, where you going? I said, I'm going to Georgetown to see Mabel and Eunice. Well, how you going? I said, with the mailman, he'd be in a minute. Back then, you could ride with the mailman and pay him a little fee because he drives his own cars, you see. And I said, how much would you charge me to take me to Myrtle Beach? He said, 25 cents. A big fee, ain't it? And he took me there for 25 cents to put me out. I said, well, I'm hungry and I got to have something to drink. So I went, took the other quarter I had and went and got me a 10-cent, a 5-cent Pepsi and a 5-cent cinnamon bun to sit on the curb and eat it. I said, well, I got to head for Georgetown. I better get to going. Now that's 10 cents that I spent, and I had 15 cents left. And I walked to Brook Green Garden. As you pass Brook Green Garden, come to Georgetown, after you pass the entrance, you go on down a few feet, and there's an oak tree sitting almost in the highway with a concrete around it, not high, same height as the road. And I said, this is shade in this country. I'm going to sit here until I get me a ride. And so I sit there probably a couple of hours, and I was thumbing everything to come by. Back then, there wasn't any traffic, very little traffic. And this old man from Georgetown had 3 or 4 black fellows on a flatbed big truck. And he stopped and picked me up. And I got on the back with them other fellows, and I rode to Georgetown. When he stopped at the red light, I got off. I thanked him. And I said, I got to find Mabel where she lived, and she lived at 231 Scrivener Street. Well, I found Scrivener Street, then I had to find the number as I walked down it. And so she worked here at a cafe. Both of my sisters did, as waitress. And Mr. Miller owned the house that they lived in. He rented rooms, you know, back then. And I walked up and I asked Miss Miller, does Mabel Pender live here? Yes, she does, son. I said, is she here? Well, I don't know. I can go check. Sure enough, she was at the house. And I stayed with them, and they had a bathroom and everything in the room, and we eat out. And I stayed with them until I got me a job at Wilson's Groceria. And I stayed there, they got me a job, stayed there for $12 a week. I worked there, $12 a week. That was big money for me. And then I went ahead and got me a job at the box plant, at the paper mill. After that, and then after that, I was drafted. And that is pretty well my life that I just told you about. But I made a lot of friends in Georgetown as I grew up. And then I worked at Kaminsky Wholesale Hardware Company. Now the Kaminskys are pretty rich. They owned about half of Front Street at one time. And I'll start off with their names. Mr. Joe Kaminsky and his wife, she was dead after I got to Georgetown. He lived by himself with his daughter. And I got a job with the Kaminskys right there by the town clock. It was a wholesale place, not a retail. We only sold to stores. And it was me and Charlotte McConnell, Frank Sawyer, and myself, and Nat Kaminsky, Miss Violet St. Germain. She was the bookkeeper and a wonderful person. And Mr. J.R. Seo, pretty rich man. He was the manager of it. And he told them Kaminskys what to do and what not to do. And he was a rough old man, but I loved him. And I worked there for quite a while. And they had a big warehouse over by Fraser Street. And that was for plows and tractors and all kind of tubing and pipes and stuff over there, all kind of farming things, you know. And we had 3 salesmen that went all over the state and sold merchandise out of that store. Okay, when I first went there, my department was the 3rd floor of all the things. They'd climb them steps every day or ride the yellow elevator, and it was a pull rope elevator. I guess it was about a 6 by 6 foot. And you'd pull that rope and go up on the elevator, but you didn't ride it. It was dangerous. You go up the steps every time. And so, and Frank Sawyer had the second floor, and Charlie McConnell had the third floor, first floor. So finally I worked myself down to the first floor as they hired new people. And every year, around July, is when they closed their books and figured out how much money they made that year. And we sold and put it on one big Jordan trucking company, but haul all our box stuff that we would, the salesmen would send their orders in, we'd fill them, put them in them boxes, and mark on the orders what store to go to and what town it's in. And we would do all of that. And Lord, we'd have a boxcar load of stuff nearly every day to go out of the store. We had hammers, saws, Lord, nails, all kind of big water valves, anything you wanted, and all kind of harnesses for mules and stuff. And I really enjoyed the job and everything. And I was making $28 a week there. Well, that was big money too. And of course, as time went on, you got a raise, you know, it went up. And so finally, Mr. Miller at the Carolina Hardware, which was down the street about 4 blocks, he died. And they said, Ralph, son, we're going to put you as manager down there. I said, I don't know where I can handle it. You can handle it. You're just talking now. So they put me down there for quite a while. And so I left there and went to the Lawyer Motor Company, the Ford place. And that was owned by Mr. Frank Sawyer. Frank Sawyer. And a lot of people want to know why Lawyer Motor Company was the name of it. Herbert Loyal and Miss Margaret, they were the ones from up north that came south to stay with their people here. Herbert Loyal bought the property and didn't do anything to it, but just buy the property at the store. And now I don't remember where Miss Margaret was his sister or were his wife. But anyway, Mr. Loyal, Herbert Loyal, he died. And Frank Sawyer married her. When he married her, and then they wanted to put in a car place there and call it Loyal Motor Company from Herbert Loyal. And then they hired me there to be a salesman. And I worked there for quite a bit. And finally they made me general manager. But I know everybody in the county just about, and who is good and who is bad. I would get in like Bobby Grantham was deputy sheriff. Came in one day and said, Ralph, I want to buy that car right there. I said, all right, Bobby. I said, he said, but now, Bobby, I know what's wrong. You ain't got no down payment, you got no money. He said, how did you know? I said, you were hum-hawing. I said, you don't have to have a down payment any money, Bobby, to buy it. If you want it, just go ahead and sign the contract. I mean, that's legal, you know. So he did, and when he went home, June told his wife, said, Bobby, how did you buy that car? He bought it from Ralph. A couple of weeks later, she went to work at the bank because they were poor and they had 3 children, and they had to keep things going, you know. And she came in there, she said, I need that little car there to drive to work every day. I said, okay, Miss Grantham, you can get the car. She said, but Miss Grantham, I know you don't have a down payment, do you? She said, no, I don't, Ralph. I said, sign right here for me, please. Can you handle this payment all right? She said, oh yeah, I can handle it. I said, that's good. She said, but I thought you had to have a down payment. No, you got to have good credit. That's all you got to have. But honey, I run those 2 stores for 48 and a half years. That's a long time. I turned 18 and the draft got me. And I said, Lord have mercy. Here I am, a 18-year-old kid. I went to school until the 5th grade, and I had to stop because Mom and Daddy couldn't buy books. I had to borrow books to study. And I went ahead and got drafted, and I was on the way to San Francisco. I said, Lord have mercy. I'm on troop train heading for San Francisco. What am I going to do? I got no kin out there where I'm going. I went to Shepherd's Field, Texas. That's where I went to basic training. It was 2,400 of us got on the Admiral C.F. Hughes. That was a big ship to hold 2,400 people. And we went from San Francisco to Manila in the Philippines. And when we got into Manila Bay, almost ready to dock, them little boys were jumping off that platform up there just as fast as they could jump. And they would swim through our boat. They'd swim like a fish. Hey, Joe, throw money. And we'd throw them a nickel, a dime, a quarter, you know. And they would go down to the bottom and come up. Throw more. They put it in the teeth and swim. And when you get to the top, they take it out of the teeth and show it to you. Throw more. And we left there, and we went to a place that I will never forget. Went to Palawan. That's the southern tip of Luzon in the Philippines. It's an island that's 300 miles long and 3 miles wide. And that's where I stayed for quite a while. And I had me a monkey there called Pete. And 2 or 3 of my buddies wanted to go to Zamboanga. Zamboanga Island, which was a little part away from us. We went over there that weekend, and I got me another monkey and brought him back with me. And I called him Zamboanga, because that island was named Zamboanga. And our barracks, they weren't barracks, they were Quonset huts. You know what a Quonset hut is? It's round like this with 10. A barracks is like a house, square. And we didn't have any barracks, all we had was Quonset hut. That was fine. And we were right on the Sulu Sea, and that's near the equator. The breakers would come about where my driveway is there from our Quonset huts. And there was one little city in Palawan that I knew of. That was a place called Port-au-Prince. And they had a bar there, and they had a little cafe there, and the rest of it was shops like you make and sit on the sidewalk, and they would come by, people come by and buy it, the Filipino people. And I really enjoyed that island, but there was one thing that really bothered me. The name of it was Palawan, and the name of the situation was The Escape of Palawan. The Japanese had put American troops in a cement place bigger than this room here, and with cement walls on it, and a big flow-through pipe. They put the American people in that place and anchor them down from the ankles to the post and turn the acid on. And the American troops would just, acid would burn their legs off, and they did fall in that acid. And we visited that one weekend. It's down the island a little ways. But it made want to make tears come in your eyes. It was a sad story. Now, after I left there, I went back to Manila at Clark Field, and I was in the 13th Air Force with the 85th Fighter Wing, and my orders come from the 12th Air Division. 13th Air Force, 85th Fighter Wing to the 12th Air Division. And I was on air traffic all the time then. and I was flying from Clarkfield in Manila to Naha in Okinawa, and from there to Tachikawa, 18 miles from Tokyo, which is the biggest Air Force base in the world. That's a big Air Force base there. And it's called JAMA. It's JAMA and Tachikawa. JAMA is abbreviation, Japan Air Material Area. You get it now, JAMA? Okay, I got hurt in there bad. Head, hip. The boys, we was loading the ship, loading the plane. And he was driving the tow motor, one of the Japanese. And that tow motor forks, you know, like this, like ours. But theirs goes up and down like this. And ours the one that goes out. And he turned the curve inside of the warehouse, and that box is about 6 by 6 square. It slid off one of those forks. It hit me and knocked me from into that door. 3 or 4 of my buddies called the ambulance right quick, got me to the hospital. And our hospital was the 376 Station Hospital, which we were right at. Anyway, JAMA, 376 Hospital, the Tachikawa, all right there together. And they put me in the hospital on a little old bed about that wide, a plywood board, and one sheet on the plywood board for 14 days. And my elbows and my hips had turned raw from trying to turn over in that bed, you know, and use my elbows. So finally I got out of that. One of my old buddies come and helped me. I was on Air Force traffic for a long time, day and night. And we'd go a lot of places that I can't talk about, I don't want to talk about. And we come into Naha one night about 2:30 in the morning. I'll never forget that. That's another one of my close calls. And there was me, I was crew chief, there was the captain, which was the pilot, there was the lieutenant, the co-pilot, and the navigator is the man that steers the plane and tells you, you know, you're off course, get back 2 degrees or 10 degrees, you know. And he tells you how far you are from the next stop. Your navigator actually runs the plane, but the pilot steers it, the co-pilot. And the C-46 is a cargo plane, and the C-47 is a passenger plane, and the B-29 is a bombing plane. The biggest plane there is. And let me tell you something. That plane on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, it sure killed a lot of people. And it was so big till it dropped that bomb, and they were so low, they weren't too close to the ground, they were way up. And the captain was told by the crew chief, sir, when that atomic bomb leaves this plane, turn that ship like that, airplane, and make a circle. Why do that? Because you won't get the blast from the ground back up here. You see? The blast from that atomic bomb would have flipped us over up there. That's hard to believe. But I could go to Tokyo, out in the country, on one of them paved roads, and they with a little fence on both sides of it, where you cross a ditch or something. They got like handrails, you know. You've seen those, what I'm talking about. The shadow of the atomic bomb would be on the concrete to where it scorched the whole thing when that bomb bursted. And if you don't turn that B-29 as big as it is with them wings out yonder, it would have done this, you know, without any steering whatsoever. And that crew chief, he told that captain right quick, said, this bomb leaves this airplane, you turn this ship this way and fly sideways so that combustion won't hit the wings, you know, because the wings are up like this. If you do this, it flips you right over. But We pulled into Naha one night, Okinawa, about 2:30 in the morning, and I'll never forget this. The lieutenant, co-pilot, says, "Sir, we about out of gas." And I heard him. And I walked up there to the door, and I looked at the gas gauge. My God, it's between a quarter and empty. We got to get to the ground soon. And we got right there at Naha Air Force Base. We knew we were pretty close to it because the navigator can tell where you are every second while you're up down there. The navigator can. Because you got all them big computers in there. And he said, "Cap, we got to get some gas. We got to get to Okinawa first." Well, we should be right at it. How about calling the tower and ask him to turn on the runway lights? We should be right over it. Okay. He called the tower and said, "We don't have any lights. The gooks stole all the bulbs." They were stealing anything. And the captain looked at me and said, "Sergeant says, what in the world did we do now?" "Sir, you asking me? You're supposed to be telling me what to do." He said, "Well, Sergeant, I know that, but I'm asking you a question. What we're going to do now?" I shook my head and he turned, "Just a minute, sir." I said, "I got an idea. I think it'll work. Tell the navigator to call the tower again and tell him to put a Jeep at that end of the runway with the lights on it and one at this end, and we will come in between them. The lights, you know." He said, "That's a good idea." Well, we did, and we come in between the two Jeeps with the lights on and landed. And just time we landed, the wheels hit that runway, that engine's cut off. Both engines. It had two engines, one on each side. Boy, if that wasn't a close crash, I'd never seen it. That's my heart. It started beating real fast. And I said, "My God." And I come back on the Fred C. Ainsworth, like Yokohama. Yokohama is just a little bit south of Tokyo. And it's a big marina place where they serve the ships and stuff. But that tsunami, when that tsunami hit, you remember a while back? You saw it on the news, I guess. I said, "My God, there's downtown Tokyo, the Ginza. The Ginza is downtown where the main crossing is of Tokyo." I said, "Well, I've traveled that street a many a day," and it destroyed that whole area in there. Tokyo is, the people there, they aren't like us. They live differently than we do. I speak Japanese. I speak Tagalog. Tagalog is Filipino language, and Japanese language is you call Japanese. And like from 1 to 5, ichi ni san shi go, roku shichi hachi go to juni. That's 1 to 10. I don't know doku ikeno hubba hubba to show, and they talk fast too. Koko ilai she. But if I got to fight them, I say I want to know what they're talking about, so I can talk too. But it was a great experience for me in life as a young boy with no education. I went to the 5th grade in school. When I came back to the States, I knew a lot about the Air Force then. I knew a lot about what I should do to be a man and learn things, especially people, and believe in God. Those things I do. And I said, I got to go to night school and learn to have a high IQ so I can get promoted, more often, in rank. And I did. And I studied, oh my God, and they pick up a book to read it. They turn to the back and read forward. They read up and down and not across. It's opposite from what we do. The Filipinos was nice people, there was no doubt about it. And Pete and Zamboanga, my two monkeys, they kept me company all the time. Zamboanga was a big monkey and Pete was a little one. But Zamboanga one day took my watch off my little old desk I had there, took it off, put it on his arm like I wear it, and went up the coconut tree. I said, Zamboanga, you come down now with my watch. I went back in the house and got my shotgun, a rifle, and come back. I said, you better come down. And I shot a couple of times. I didn't want to hit him. I didn't hit him. I just scared him. He come down with my watch. He had it on his arm where I had it. But it was a great experience, that lifetime. And I took up karate when I came back to the States. I mean, before I came back in Japan. We had a big gym there, and we had a place for fighting and wrestling. And we had a carpet on the floor where we wouldn't get too hurt. And now over in Japan, there is something that they use. Everybody is Papa-san, Mama-san, Ralph-san. That son is on everything that they tell you. And every afternoon at a certain time around 6 or 7 o'clock, I'd go to the gym where they fight and wrestle. And Papa-san was an old man, but don't underestimate him, please. He is the man in this world. He weighs 130 pounds. Lord have mercy, and I'll be about 175 then. And every time I'd go and get on the mat with him, he'd bust my can on that floor. Oh Lord, my bones would rattle. And so we have to go in there for quite a while. I said, Papa-san, what is that, Joe-san? He always called me Joe-san. I said, I'm going home in 10 days now. I got my orders. Well, I'm so sorry. He spoke good English. I said, but how about tell me the secret of this thing? Joe-san, no tell the secret, not today. The day before you go home, I'll tell you the secret. I said, okay. So I kept going every night until the day before I was supposed to come home. He said, all right now, Joe-san, here's the secret. He told me. He said, now see if you can put me on the floor. I did. But it was a job to do it. But I enjoyed a lot because a lot of the Japanese people were like our good people. They were good people. But the ones that was bad was the ones that had been trained to be bad. And boy, they were trained good too.